¿Qué es Música por un Cambio? Música por un Cambio es un proyecto dedicado a combatir mediante la música el racismo y la discriminación en México y en Estados Unidos. Esta serie de recitales invita a la reflexión y al cuestionamiento. Música por un Cambio busca que nos demos cuenta de la realidad que existe en el mundo y que hagamos algo al respecto. Mediante la música de compositoras y compositores mexicanos y afrodescendientes, así como conocer la opinión y trayectoria de cada uno de los involucrados, Música por un Cambio busca sembrar una semilla de lucha, de conciencia, de amor y de humildad en todos nosotros. No hay que dejar que sea solo un ideal. Hagamos acciones. En esta serie existen dos asociaciones involucradas, Racismo MX y Castle of Our Skins. Nosotros podemos apoyarlas a que continúen su ardua labor. Para ello, podemos realizar donaciones mediante PayPal. Todos necesitamos un cambio. El mundo necesita que cambiemos. ¿Qué nos hace falta para hacerlo? Que la música sea el cambio que el mundo necesita. Hola, mi nombre es Armando Ortiz Montenegro. El día de hoy en Música por un Cambio les tengo a mi gran amigo Malek Blalock, que nos viene a interpretar con su gran instrumento. No me refiero ni de un violín, ni de una viola, ni de un cello. Me refiero al gran contrabajo, que lo toca con una maestría que no se la van a creer. Nos viene a interpretar una obra que se estrenó este año, a finales de agosto, la obra de la compositora Mason Vines, The Reckoning. Espero que lo disfruten. Esto es Música por un Cambio y les dejo con Malek Blalock con su contrabajo tocando The Reckoning de Mason Vines. Comenzamos. Malek, how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh man, I've been playing the double bass since I'd say fourth grade. Been in my school district's music program uh, since fourth grade. I picked up the electric bass around that same time, and I played in the school orchestra, the school jazz band. I even did marching band as like a drummer. I played in uh, many different kinds of other bands, like outside of school. Like I played in um, pop rock, jazz fusion, and I currently do hip hop also. I'm a producer. So I pretty much tried to make my entire life about music.
I know you from the classical world scene on music. You have a lot of transitions in the middle. How has that been for you?
I've always tried to do as much as I can involving music. So I mentioned all of like the school things that I did. A lot of my opportunities in music have come through being involved in orchestra or the band, meeting other musicians within those instances and you know, collaborating. And that's what it's really made about.
I know that you have struggled a lot in finding pieces specifically for your instrument,
Yes, definitely.
especially because you said that you were working with musicians but doing this solo research.
It's been uh as you know, a difficult search. Um, and I think the most interesting thing I have come across is that there's actually a petition going right now to commission Black artists to write pieces specifically for double bass. Like that shows you how little music there is for our specific instrument and by Black artists. There's a great many Black composers. You have to look for them because they're not at the forefront, but it's not focused on as much as I think it should be.
I mean, we are looking for living composers, but this has been going all the way back to always, like how do you think we can, as musicians and audiences and as, I don't know, like teachers and educators, how do you think we can manage to pull that knowledge into our daily um, daily practices?
I feel like there needs to be less focus on how in classical music, what we mostly play is like classical, and a bunch of pieces get rotated. We play them a bunch of times. I feel like maybe we can take a break from that and start focusing on modern composers for a certain amount of time, and then we come back, because I mean that stuff is all tried and true, but I feel like having access to composers that are living and having them um, explain how to play what they've written is a more valuable experience than trying to play something that's already been done, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, countless of times. I mean, we are just playing the same piece over and over again by the same composer of Germany of 15 years ago. So
Right.
500 years ago or something like that.
Like at Boko, some of the pieces I enjoy playing the most are the ones that are by modern composers that
Mm.
come in and they work with us. Like that's some of the better experiences I've had to break out of the tradition. Because I mean,
Yeah,
I feel like orchestral music has a very deep rooted tradition, which is good, but I feel like it's too much at sometimes.
okay.
Like we focus too much on the past and not enough on what's happening now. And when I think about the future of classical music, I just see us continuing to play the same repertoire that we've always played.
There are people that know about classical music and
Mhm.
only know old composers because of this cycling of pieces of the same five, six people. How would you introduce them to these new composers?
That would probably involve organizing like concerts that highlight those specific composers, or um, music education. Like when you teach kids about music, don't just focus on like all the old classic composers that we all know. Like try to focus on the people who compose today. Maybe even like include examples of people who compose for movies, because everyone knows movies, everyone knows soundtracks to movies. That's an easy avenue into some composers that are like currently living.
That's very interesting. You say that music education, us as musicians, um, maybe sometimes tend to forget, and I don't know if you agree with me, tend to forget that we also need to bring a little education to even to us musicians,
Yes.
and you said another thing that I want to highlight, that is like super important, that we tend to focus more about the things that happen and less about the things that are actually happening right now in the world. And in this scenario that the world is right now, what do you think is the role of the musician in terms of changing, like how the musician will change or will adequate, how can the musician adequate to this changing process that it needs to be done?
So I feel like the role of the musician has always been sort of what you're talking about, to highlight things that are happening, and convey them through emotions and through lyricism. So I think the role of musicians currently is to highlight the experiences of what Black people have been going through in America. Um, for Black musicians to share those experiences, like I myself have written songs and written posts on social media sharing my own experience in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that's what is really important for musicians to do right now.
So basically just let people say what they want to say now that they need to say it. You said that you have, well, done a lot of music in response to this movement. Can you tell us a little bit more about that music that you have created?
What I did was, I mentioned that I do hip hop.
Yeah.
So one of the best ways, in my opinion, to share your emotions is through poetry. So when the Black Lives Matter movement really started to get moving, and I saw that things were changing, and I felt like that kind of hope for the future, is when I decided to write a song that shared my experience, basically sharing it with my white colleagues, people who wouldn't understand firsthand. I'm just trying to like help them understand me, and through that understand the movement better.
Right now we need to keep repeating ourselves and repeating ourselves that Black Lives Matter, like, and in every way possible. You name poetry, you name music, there's protests, there's I don't know, there's statements written, there's people in the Congress, there's people all over the world trying to change this situation. And I'm very happy that we can have you here as part of this changing process for all of us.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to be here, part of it. If there's anything I'll say, it's to listen to what people are saying. Like always be listening, highlight Black voices during this time, especially. Um, Definitely do research. Like if you're not educated about what's going on, then it's not going to help the cause. So yeah, that's I think the most important thing.
Thank you, Malik, for your words. Thank you for this hope in the future that you have for music and for the people. It is super important, and as you said, people, let's start listening. Stop talking for a second. Just shut up for a second. Let's start listening to the voices that need to be heard. Mason, how are you?
Oh, good. How are you doing?
For the people that are not like acquainted with you or your music, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? About your career, about your life. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, as you said, my name's Mason. I'm from Sugar Land, Texas, and I am now currently residing in Boston as a composer and freelance composer, getting my master's in music composition at the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. And most of my work as a composer includes a lot of immersive listening experiences. So I try to keep with a very pastiche style in the sense of taking from a lot of different genres, a lot of different ideas, and putting them with a lot of different mediums as far as acoustic live performance, but then also sound design, AV work, and then also including some of the senses that we all have as listeners that go beyond just listening. So taste, sight, smell, all of those things. I like to have very immersive listening experiences. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Well, that little bit told us a lot. Like, let me tell you, I need to ask you, how are you doing this whole senses thing on your music? It's super interesting, and this is the first time that I've heard some composer saying, you know what, I'm gonna do music that is gonna be tasteful.
Yeah, sure. Well, so to give an example, I'll give two. So like for my master's thesis at BOCO, I'm putting together a musician's cookbook where I've been researching the recipes of composers from like the 1300s until today, and then writing music that reflects that. So for example, Hildegard von Bingen, she's a German composer. She has a cookie recipe.
Oh,
Had no
really?
idea. And so I've been like rearranging some of her Vespers, like service music, or she has another piece called Omania Pater, and doing that, but then also pairing it with the recipes so that the audience can consume this and then also be open to some of the other information that is within composers as far as who we are, what we do, what our quirks are, what our activities are. So that's an example. And then also some of my older music, from my undergrad, I had a recital series called Goddess of Spring, and it was based on Greek mythology and the story of Persephone and Demeter and Zeus. And so with that performance, I included an audio-visual work that included the constellations, which is also based on Greek mythology, so you're seeing that. And then at the beginning of the concert, there was an altar where people could lay a flower because it was based off of the Greek festival called Thesmophoria. That's the celebration of Persephone and Demeter. And so when people came in as an audience member, we're able to lay a flower at the altar at the front of the performance hall. And then the performance included like audio visual work. It included acoustic pieces. It included sound design and like kind of 360 sounding like audio visual experience. And so it's really fun. It's something that I like to transcend as a composer as far as what's possible, and also just what's possible in storytelling and telling a narrative. So yeah.
Being a composer so diverse and with such an amazing way to combine all of these things into music, how has been your life as a composer? Can you tell us a little bit, even before you started being a composer, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So for me, the singing came first and composing came second. So I am a trained vocalist and I do perform in the area. And I've done opera and early music ensembles, jazz ensembles, and then like your more traditional choir stuff. But in high school is when composing, I would say, started. In high school, the choir that I was in, we would sell singing Valentines. And so me and my friends would mash like an old song and a new song. That way we could market to like the teachers and the students when they would buy our Valentines at lunch. And so when we would do those things, I would accompany us on guitar and then come up with the melody and the harmony. We didn't write anything down. I would just kind of sing it, we'd record it, and then sing the next line kind of like in a track form. But doing those things was really fun. I really liked, arranging, and I would write too, but arranging songs that for my friends and figuring out how to market to a lot of different listeners. I think doing music that way brings listeners together and brings people together at the end of it. So that's where it started. And then I started my bachelor's degree at the University of North Texas in Denton. It's outside of Dallas. And that opened my world up to a lot of possibilities with music as far as music academia goes. And so, yeah, and then at the end of my degree, that's when I started doing this immersive music kind of thing. And that's when I designed my recital to be that way. And now I'm here and trying to find new ways to keep doing that. So singing came first, and my sense of like performing and being within an ensemble and how I fit within a working group like that really informed my sense of composing.
You said one word that is like a huge word in this context, which is collaborating. Do you think that we as performers, or in general in classical music or in any form of music, um, do you think we sometimes lack of the idea of collaboration with new music?
I think that's a very interesting question because it's also very dicey. You know what I mean as far as question? Because like, in music academia, we have to train and in order to train, there has to be a standard rep, I guess, but that standard rep can also include new music. So I think another thing that we could maybe challenge ourselves as performers and as composers is seeing how you can put those two things together. Because in my experience as a performer, when I was back in my undergrad, I was in an early music ensemble and I was in a jazz choir. And it was interesting to compare, and there's standard rep between each medium, each genre, but what was interesting was finding like similarities between rhythmic function in the jazz choir and how that weirdly also fit some of Telemon's work and what we were singing and doing with that. And so I think ways that we can encourage ourselves to bring both of those things together is programming them both together, or finding out ways for new music to stand alone and how to approach it in a creative sense as far as programming. So
and you said a little bit of the education part. How do you think we can merge this canon? Everything is in quotes now. You said it before. How do you think we can merge the canon of music with the with contemporary rap?
with my experience as a performer, I felt power in the sense of being intersectional. So choosing to put myself in a lot of different environments to foster my own education because, and I'm so grateful for going to UNT. It was such a great school as far as the resources that were offered as far as the type of ensembles that I could be in and the type of ensembles I could write for as a composer because I was definitely double dipping. So I think we're able to take, not control, but I guess just leverage our education as far as, well, what ensembles am I in? Are they diversified? Am I, there were early music ensembles, jazz ensembles, Latino, Afro-Cuban ensembles at UNT, and like other, and then also just surrounding ensembles in the area as far as like professional choirs and ensembles and the gig world in that sense. So I think we could solve that issue individually by leveraging our education and, taking a look within ourselves and saying like, well, what ensembles am I in and what ensembles am I not in? And then comparing that to with composing, like, well, what groups am I composing for? What groups am I not composing for? Is there a reason why I'm not composing for it? Is it because I don't know the literature? Is it because I don't know the repertoire? How can I learn that repertoire? And then just so like asking, maybe not always having the right answers, but having the right type of questions as far as doing some internal work as far as figuring out how to leverage your education.
How do you think in today's context, of music and society, how do you think people can ask the right questions, can go do I mean, how can they be encouraged to do some research? Because this is all about doing research. This is all about stop thinking that you know everything and start realizing that you don't know much,
Anytime that I like was in a situation where I didn't have the answer, or I didn't know what the right answer was, sometimes that is it can induce anxiety or like some type of like, why don't I know that? Or I have this degree, why don't I know that? Or why didn't someone teach me that? And changing that mental and emotional process to, well, what can I do about that? And what can I do about that one singular instance or that one singular emotion? Because sometimes it's hard, to drink the whole ocean with one cup, so figuring out, isolating those events that eventually do topple on top of each other, but taking off a bite, here and there and solving it within those few instances. Because when you do that and the first time, or when you do that in the first instance, then you'll know what right question to ask when you're in another type of environment.
And do you think we can translate that to a scenario where it's not about music? Do you think that can apply also to the general society?
Totally, yeah. And even with, everything that we are facing as a country, as a world, as far as race relations, as far as white supremacy, and calling things what it is, the injustices what they are. I think like definitely within all facets, systems, aspects of our lives, the things that we don't have the answer for, we can always try to generate the right question or a better question, because asking questions generate answers. So
What do you think? I know that there's plenty of things that needs to change. Speaking of music, speaking of society, like plenty of things that need to change. But can you maybe name one that you think it needs to be changed, like right now? Like right now, we need to change this aspect in music or in society, because I think that if we think on music, it also applies to society automatically. For some reason, it applies automatically. So what do you think it needs to change, and how do you think we as a society can achieve that change?
for me, I would say one thing that we could really tackle, I think also in music academia, is the acknowledgement of the music and systems and theories and queries that were already present within different groups around the world. Because as far as the classical tradition and more European music, we are taught that in academia because it has a huge presence and a huge, it's an integral part as far as being classical musicians and functioning in that way. And so I'm grateful for that education. And not a but, I would say, and like also acknowledge that there are different communities of people from around the world that were already functioning within their own theories, their own enlightenment, their own sense of the world. And so not putting a European view on these groups of people and just taking them for who they are, who they claim they are, and who they claim their theories and thoughts and music are, and take it for what that is. Because I think sometimes we paint over them. We, even in like musicology with the primitive like movement or the I forget what they call it, but like with Stravinsky, like he had his periods of writing and they called one of them like I forget what it is, but like evocative or like primitive or something like that, to describe Cuban rhythms, to describe Latino Hispanic rhythms that are not primitive, they are themselves. And so I think I think that also goes around with the whole asking the right questions and stuff, always having the right answers about things, because I think that'll just kind of open us up as far as learning who people are and learning who they are and who they've always been, instead of just painting them over with a really big music academic word.
You said it, and I'm gonna just repeat it. We need to ask questions. We need to stop thinking that we know everything. We need to stop thinking that there's only one answer. There's multiple answers, and every answer is equally as valid as the only answer that we might think it is. Well, thank you very much, Mason. Thank you very much for your words, for your time. It's been a pleasure. It's been a blast.
Well, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be able to also just talk like musician to musician, but then also us being able to bring different perspectives and different sides of the same coin to this conversation. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Yeah, so nice.
Check. I don't sleep too well these days. I stay up and contemplate the ways my race suffers. Seems it everywhere I look. It's my sisters and my brothers getting locked up, getting shot up over nothing but their color. Others mad cause we saying all cops are bad, but the way they seem to view it, all crooks are black. We may never get it right, but until then we gon' fight till we see some kind of change from the ones behind the badge. Imagine your dad says he can't protect you no more, that it's a gamble when you step out that door. I'm still shaking. If I go out for a walk, they might paint me on a wall. We had snoozed too many times, y'all. It's time to start waking. Don't ever wanna see another man's throat against the pavement. Wonder what happened to the chance they should have gave him. Hope they give it to the next man with it printed on the next plan. Everyone is watching. Let's make sure they learn the lesson. Stand up.
Muchísimas gracias a todos los que nos acompañaron el día de hoy en Música por un Cambio. Gracias a Malek por su gran interpretación de esta obra de Mason Vines y por esta sorpresa que nos tuvo al final. Yo sé que ustedes no se lo esperaban, pero Música por un Cambio está lleno de sorpresas y lleno de talento. Si quieren escuchar más del talento como compositor y como productor de Malek Blalock, no se olviden seguirlo en su SoundCloud como Jaylock. Ahí tienen muchísimo material. Yo me he recetado sus canciones unas 2-3 veces, de verdad no se lo pueden perder. Y aprovechando que estoy hablando de SoundCloud, si les está gustando la música que estamos escuchando de fondo en este episodio y en los episodios subsecuentes, esta música la compuso exclusivamente para esta serie de recitales mi gran amigo Matthias, que también lo pueden encontrar en su SoundCloud. Aquí lo voy a poner en mi mano, en su SoundCloud. Entonces no se olviden de seguir a estas dos personas talentosísimas. También sigan la música de Mason Vines. Y gracias a Mason y gracias a Malek por sus grandes palabras, porque de verdad nos dejan con una enseñanza muy muy bonita. Déjenme les platico de lo que viene el día de mañana, porque el día de mañana saquen su silla de jardín, saquen su telescopio, porque se va a lanzar un cohete que va a llegar hasta la luna, con un estreno mundial. Y lo voy a repetir otras 2 veces, va a ser 3 veces. Estreno mundial de la obra de la gran compositora mexicana Leticia Armijo. con su obra Nebulosa para contrabajo solista. De verdad, es un honor para esta serie de recitales tener un estreno mundial de una compositora tan talentosa de sangre mexicana. Gracias a todas las personas que están involucradas en este proyecto, porque sin ninguno de ustedes, sin la ayuda de ustedes, esto no se podría hacer. No se olviden de seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales, Música por un Cambio en Facebook y en Instagram. Gracias a todos por compartir esta serie y tampoco se olviden de hacer sus donaciones a Racismo MX y Castle for Skins. Recordemos que estamos apoyando estas dos asociaciones que luchan día con día para generar un cambio en el mundo. Nos vemos el día de mañana en Música por un Cambio para la segunda parte del recital de Malek con la obra Estreno Mundial, Nebulosa, de Leticia Armijo. Gracias a todos ustedes por haber estado aquí. Mi nombre es Armando Ortiz Montenegro. Y que la música sea el cambio que el mundo necesita. Hasta luego.